What's happening, everybody? Thanks for joining us today on Cinema Recap. Glad to have you here. So today we're going to check out a 2017 crime drama called All the Money in the World.
Get Mr. Chase a gun. Yes, sir.
Spoilers ahead. We start our movie in Rome, 1973, in a very trendy black and white opener. Some guy in a flashy blazer walks among people in the streets. Wonder what he's up to. Looking like a member from a 90s boy group, or maybe he should be somewhere surfing. Now there's an interesting fountain. Our guy's approached by some very professional looking ladies.
You should give me a discount on account of my age.
Maybe you go back to your babysitter, kid. They don't seem interested. We discover our blazer-wearing friend is named Paolo. The next lady tells him how it is.
The street is no place for a boy like you.
Just in time for a perfect example of how that isn't true. A van full of shady guys pull up and snatch him off the streets. Spoke too soon, Paolo. Next, we see a woman, presumably somewhere else in the world, looking pretty upset. She rushes into a room full of, God, what is that sound? It's like a fax machine getting tortured. There's an old man, Mr. Getty. I couldn't quite hear that over that screeching machine, with a pile of long, skinny papers printing off continuously. What he's doing? We have no idea, or at least I don't. She tells the man that his grandson, Paul, had been kidnapped. Ah, Paolo, Paul. I see what they did there. Paul's mother was on the phone and wanted to speak with him. Mr. Getty was too busy for that and told, apparently, Nancy to say that he was unavailable. Dang, Gramps. No love. We hear a voice of our poor kid, kidnapped Paul, saying that his dear old grandpa, Mr. Getty, thinks pretty highly of himself.
To be a Getty is an extraordinary thing.
Apparently, Grandpa Getty over here is not the richest man in the world, but is the richest man in the history of the world. Impressive, but I have a feeling that he's not going to use it in the right way.
What do you want?
Unfortunately, Paul, it's probably a lot of money, and your Gramps seems pretty stingy. Now we jump to Saudi Arabia, 1948. We've got Mr. Getty, looking like the odd man out, but has that I'm super rich swagger. Paul says that his grandpa was the first man to get the oil out of Saudi deserts. No one knew how to get this oil. Good old Gramps prevailed by making a big-ass boat that he so cleverly and egotistically named after himself. I'm starting to get an overwhelming sense that this man's a bit of a narcissist, and probably a proud and ironical cheap one at that. Jump to an interview with Playboy. Oh, that's right, they had other stories. They used to interview people back then. Thank God, because no one wants a Getty centerfold. This is what you get when you cross a mafioso with a mogul millionaire from GTA. He's sitting there with the biggest Godfather vibe ever, his German Shepherd to the right, and bragging about his money. Let's not forget that fancy chair, like a true narcissist. Over $1 billion. In that time, I guess it is the oil industry.
But if you can count your money, you're not a billionaire.
Oh really? I call BS. This is totally the kind of guy who sits around counting his money all day. I'll put my own money on that. What? Bend the light? Apparently Paul's so brainwashed from being ridiculously rich his entire life that he thinks there's some kind of humans with superpowers. Where are they driving to? Southern Italy, and things aren't looking good for Paul. Paul is taken to a nice convenient jail cell on this Italian farm. His captors don't seem like complete a-holes, but still, they did kidnap him. At least they offered him some water and a bed. Looks like you got some toilet paper in the corner. That's thoughtful. We jump again to a woman we're meeting for the first time. It appears that she's Paul's mother, and she might have gotten the wrong idea at first.
We are rapitori, kidnappers.
Oops, the guy calls himself 50 and says that Paul's safe, but they have to cough up a crap ton of money to get him back. Like $17 million to be exact. She says she doesn't have the money, but he seems to know that her father-in-law is Mr. Getty. Oh, this movie really enjoys to jump around. 9 years earlier, two boys jump on the same woman and her husband in bed. Like a real dad, he sleeps through the whole thing. Jeez, how many kids are there? Mom and dad seem to have a happy family, and she even seems to get the good old traditional hangover cure.
Hair of the dog might help.
Looks like they're out of Christmas shopping and one of the kids starts asking about some huge skyscraper. Something tells me she doesn't like charming Mr. Getty. Wonder why. Turns out he was an absentee father. Should have seen that coming. Oil industry too busy for dad duties? Looks like our mom Gail thinks he should ask his dad for a job.
We're not poor, we're broke.
Well, I suppose when you need money, you might even reach out to a dad that wasn't there for you. They decide to write a letter to Mr. Getty. Gail, apparently being the mastermind, has the whole appeal to a narcissist thing down. Well, they managed to have nice dinners for some broke people. An awkward mom and dad makeout sesh was interrupted when they got a telegram.
Sends telegrams anymore.
Well, JPG II seems to have been summoned to Rome by his pops, John Paul Getty the OG. They get to Rome and the kids are the only ones enjoying the sights. I don't feel like that's how it usually goes anymore. Can't get those phones away from our kids. Simpler times. They get to some fancy looking house and the kids can't help but touch every expensive item in that place. Thankfully, Grandpa seems to have a sense of humor. Mr. Getty goes on to flex about how he bought the statue his grandson was holding off a man on the streets for $11 after haggling the guy down from 19. Apparently he could sell the thing in an auction for over $1 million, but you know, we had to talk a crippled guy down from 19. Hey, rich people don't get rich by spending their money. Getty really wants everyone to like him, including his grandson, and is really buying into the whole I want a family thing now. I'm not really sure that Paul II feels that his dad's excuse for not wanting to be weighed down mentally with a family was a very good one. Keeping his mouth shut. Now they must really be broke. Grandson Paul III seems to enjoy writing his grandfather's rude response letters to people asking him for money for surgeries or other unfortunate things. Have a heart, man. He says that he's firing someone and making his son the vice president of his European oil company.
Sink or swim.
And I guess that's what he gets for asking for help. Yeah, Dad, you may not want this guy to influence your son too much. Commence more weird rich people beliefs, as it becomes obvious that this man is completely obsessed with himself. He brings his grandson Paul to the ancient historical landmark Hadrian's Wall. He tells Paul that in a past life, he was Hadrian, and that the blood of emperors runs through him. According to Paul, his grandfather's idea of a dynasty could never work. His dad's drinking and drug problems would always come before business. And talk about a disappointing son. Well, we know where that relationship ended up. You guessed it, divorce. Gail left Paul and demanded only child support for her kids, and that her oldest son come home from Morocco. Like a typical teenager, he was unhappy that his mother interrupted his fun in the sun.
Why'd you have to ruin it?
He'll understand later, Gail. She actually cares about her kids, unlike his grandfather. Years pass and Gail realizes quickly just how much Mr. Getty doesn't care about his family when she sees him telling the press that there is nothing that he would pay to get his grandson back. Man, that's tough. And that's his favorite grandson.
Tell him I'm coming.
Uh-oh, now he's got Mama Bear on the way. Enter Fletcher Chase. Fletcher's a cool man, one with connection, one that Getty sends to do his talking. I swear, I see this guy in everything now. Getty wants him to intervene in his affairs with his ex-daughter-in-law Gail, who continues to be worried about the safety of her son. If she wants to make a phone call to her lawyer, she apparently has to use a payphone, even when in Getty's house. Man, this guy's frugalness has no boundaries. Getty claims that he loves all his grandchildren, and even says that Paul is special. Instead of paying the ransom, let's just send our guy Chase to do it instead. I picture something like Liam Neeson in Taken. Anyway, Chase tells her that money isn't always about money for Mr. Getty. Has he ever met the guy he works for? He's going to Rome to get her son back. Needless to say, Gail doesn't believe him. Jeez, the paparazzi. They're crazy. Gail and Chase meet with the lead investigator, Corvo. He breaks the news to him that every scumbag in Rome is claiming that they're the kidnappers. Hey Ma, we're not gonna really get any sleep now, so why not drink a little, right? Chase searches Paul's bedroom, looking for drugs or whatever else teenagers have in their rooms. Gail comes in and asks him about what he used to do, which he essentially says that he just talked a lot and made deals, but didn't really use guns. Not sure if that sounds very promising when you're dealing with kidnappers. Meanwhile, Paul's still in his cage somewhere in southern Italy. His kidnapper doesn't understand why his family doesn't love him. This guy doesn't seem entirely sociopathic, but it's still pretty early in the movie. He lets Paul see him by accident and tells him that if he were to mention that he could identify one of them, then they would remove his eyeballs. Hope that's not foreshadowing. That's a big ring. Wonder if he stole it. Chase goes out to his car and is kindly rear-ended. The man is signaling him to follow him somewhere. Seems risky. Well, our guy Chase has some cojones on him because he walked right into some Italian gang's lair. They were saying that they wanted money for Paul, but Chase knew that they didn't have them. That's when they tell him that Paul had talked about having himself kidnapped for ransom money and a joke. Chase doesn't like the word joke. He's heard it before.
If there's a joke, I'd like to make sure that I'm in on it.
Can't blame you there, Chase. Mr. Getty feels like money corrupts everyone, especially kids. Well, that's kinda true, but I'm not sure if it's safe to say that Paul is definitely not kidnapped. Well, too bad for him. It looks like they're gonna think he's chilling on a beach somewhere. The men who have Paul captive are growing tired of everything. Can't say I blame them. I'm sure they're especially sick of taking him to the bathroom. Yo, I thought there was toilet paper in here. The guy taking his time let Paul see his face by accident. Something we've learned isn't good for Paul. Another guy comes along, and before you know it, both of them are pointing guns at him. Then a gunshot. But in true Hollywood fashion, they don't let us see what happened. It's Corvo. He wants Gail to identify the body of her son. Uh-oh. Maybe their story of him chilling on the beach somewhere was a little unfounded. Oh yeah, Gail. I'd be beyond pissed as well. She lets Chase have it, telling him how useless he is trying to find her son. For his sake, he better hope it's not Paul.
No, stupid? Maybe.
Chase was lucky. The body wasn't Paul's, but it did come from the same van that kidnapped him. The CSI crew of Italy was able to identify the man they found and pinpoint his associates. Finally, some actual detective work. I guess that answers the question of who was shot. Not exactly sure how they knew these guys were in the southern Italian countryside, but let's go with it. Everyone starts hiding in the bushes with their guns when one of the guys walks into the brush to take a dump. Somehow his spidey sense went off and he starts shooting but gets taken out instead. The cops kill everyone there before they realize that Paul's gone. What idiots. The guy pooping was holding on by a thread and barely whispered that they sold him. Great. And of course he dies before he says anything else. Next, we find some fancy, stiff-act Italian man who looks like he screams at old women and babies when he doesn't get his way. He runs some kind of sweatshop making knockoff Louis Vuitton handbags. This is the guy they sold Paul to? What kind of plans could they have for him? What's that? He's gotta eat a lot of meat to recover? Duh. Hope that doesn't mean he's gonna eat Paul. At this point, even Chase is saying that Getty needs to pay the ransom. They realize he's gone to an investor and this apparently means bad news. Getty, on the other hand, wants to keep his money to himself. Finally, Chase is seeing how selfish this old man really is.
What would it take? More.
How could the richest man in the world need more money? Oh, poor Paul. Yeah, he's a goner. Gail gets on the phone with Cinquanta. You remember, the kidnapper guy that was nice to Paul? Well, things go south once Chase gets on the line. In a motherly rage, Gail clocks Chase with the phone. Not really fond of his negotiation tactics. However, he's really on her side. At least he's finally starting to see who the real a-hole is in this situation. Apparently, Chase's negotiation tactics were a success, because they received a phone call later only saying $7 million. Still a lot, but better than $17 million. Next thing you know, Getty's over here spending over $1 million on a painting. This man. Paul's acting more ungrateful towards Cinquanta than he normally does, even after he brings him a nice steak. I think that Paul's getting a little bit sick and tired of his accommodations. He hatches a plan to set a fire to the field and make a break for it. His plan works too, but not without being seen. Hopefully Cinquanta won't say anything. He finds a nice man to take him in for the night. Oh, bless him, because I'm sure Paul smells like a dumpster fire. He calls Gail, telling her he's safe. Well, except he's not. That's not good. Oh, great. It's the knockoff handbag guy. Meanwhile, he's pretty pissed about the fire that happened and made some comment about bringing in the doctor. Another thing that doesn't sound good. Gail sees a familiar statue on the TV, looking like the same one that Grandpa Getty gave to Paul when he was a kid. Maybe it's worth something. That's exactly what she was thinking too. And she was disappointed to hear that the statue was a trinket, sold to tourists. Nothing of real value, as if things couldn't get any worse. Paul is also about to endure his punishment. Cinquanta gets him to drink something before the doctor comes in, hoping it would make things less traumatizing. That's a valiant effort, but come on, whatever's gonna happen now, you know it's gonna hurt. But I'm still standing by saying Cinquanta isn't so bad. At least the doc put Paul to sleep first. Sort of. Aw, poor Paul. The bad guys sent Paul's ears in a letter, like Vincent frickin' Van Gogh to a newspaper. And of course, to these guys, this is news, and they want to buy the pictures off Miss Getty. Only she has a better plan. Now Mr. Getty has 1,000 copies of the paper blowing around his estate. Gail talks with Cinquanta again, who gives her some crap for not getting Paul out of the situation sooner. I mean, I know he's not terrible, but he did still kidnap her son. Immediately after, there's another call, this time from the Hinge in London, telling her the good news. Mr. Getty will pay the ransom. Finally, for crying out loud. London was an interesting place. Gail's ex-husband was there, looking like he was hit by several buses full of drugs. Mr. Getty decided helping Paul was acceptable once he realized he could write it off as a tax deduction if he loaned the ransom to his son, Paul's dad.
Take my son's kidnapping as a tax deduction.
I don't know how she didn't throw something at him. It only gets worse when they lay down the rest of the bottom line. Gail has to sign over the rights to all her children to her ex-husband. Dad looks strung out and is shaking his head. Something telling me it's not his idea. Again, her self-control, impressive. Gail talks to Cinquanta and tells him that they only have enough of Paul's ransom money, which he responds that it's not good enough. Basically, no one's gonna win this, especially Paul. Gail decides it's time to play hardball and takes the risk to get her son back. Tell them that you have the money and fake it till you make it, essentially. Hey, sometimes we gotta take risks when our father-in-law is a greedy jerk. Of course, Getty's wondering how Gail has the ransom as he's standing there reading his fruit by the foot paper. Chase is sick of his douchey ways, telling him how it is. Heck yeah, Chase. Seems like what he said resonated with the selfish old coot too, because he went ahead and wired that entire ransom like he was supposed to instead of going with Gail's bluff. Finally, some progress. Gail barely escapes the paparazzi with her life as the bank prepares the money. Dang, look at all that cash. cash. 50 gives specific, detailed instructions and they follow them well. Did they have to break the windshield though? The money was legitimate and it finally bought Paul his freedom, although he's really looking awful. Hopefully he doesn't die from some ear infection. It's gross. 50 tells him to leave Italy and gives him a friendly high five. Good old 50, always looking out for Paul. Too bad he didn't take Gale up on that offer to get him out of Italy. Even though they made the drop, the bad guys are still mad that the cops were circling the area. Crap. Oh, Paul, you better run some more. Just when he thought it was over. Mr. Getty gets back to his estate, looking like he probably had a stroke. Could it be karma? Where's all the house staff? Oh, that's right. Chase was the one who employed him, and he went and made him mad too. Yo, the streets of Italy at night are eerie. Paul was almost caught again, but 50 came to his rescue, screaming at Chase to get him out of Italy. Yo, no kidding, man. That's what they've been trying to do. Finally, they get past the blood and picture-thirsty paparazzi, and they're just as toxic as the bad guys, but not nearly as toxic as the now deceased Mr. Getty. Turns out Mr. Getty's money was all under a trust, so he couldn't spend his money, just invest them in things like his art and antiques. With there being no one to take up the throne until her kids come of age, his banks thought it'd be best if she took his place. Well, isn't that fitting? Too bad he didn't die like a week sooner, so all this drama could have been avoided. And with his massive fortune and millions of dollars of investments, she was filthy rich. Like, stupid rich. It's crazy. I wonder if they still have the Van Gogh to give Paul. Seems fitting. That'd be funny. Who needs that many busts of things? Ugh. Including himself? Thankfully, Mr. Getty's family has been more generous than he ever was, creating a museum with most of his cherished belongings, and even donating a large portion of his fortune to charity. And that's it, everybody. That was our recap of the drama All the Money in the World, starring Mark Wahlberg, Christopher Plummer, and Michelle Williams. It was released back in 2017, produced by Imperative Entertainment, Scott Free Productions, and Red Rum Films. So what do you think? Did Mr. Getty love his family, or was it always about the money? Let us know in the comments below with the hashtag Cinema Recap. Hit the like if you felt it, and subscribe if you're not with us already. Always great to see you here. Till next time.